On a newscast tonight, a day after lawmakers failed to pass a bill to reform the pension system for public servants, the presidential office assured the public that efforts to change the system are ongoing and urged lawmakers to approve the bill. Samsung Electronics held a groundbreaking ceremony with the president in attendance on a new chip production line in Pyeongtaek. It's the Korean tech giant's largest ever investment in a single production line. Also, we turn to an expert for a view on Japan's failure to apologize for its wartime sex crimes and its push to include facilities where Koreans were enslaved on the UNESCO World Heritage list and the effect these actions have had on relations with Korea. Stay with us for these and more. Hello, welcome to Primetime News on this Thursday, May 7th. I'm Daniel Che.
And I'm Hwang Jie. Thank you for joining us.
Our first focal point of the day, the aftermath of the failure by Korea's rival political parties to pass a civil servant pension reform bill, which is linked to a related bill. And
lawmakers are still wrangling over that bill to reform the national pension system, raising speculation that the plan could be stuck in limbo. Our Kim Young-gil starts us off.
The trouble started last Saturday when the ruling Saenuri Party and the opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy agreed to attach national pension service reforms to the main public servant pension bill. However, after President Park Geun-hye criticized the national pension reforms, the ruling party backed away from the agreement. The NPAD attempted to introduce a new clause to pass the bills, but that didn't work either.
I conclude that it was not right to change what the rival party's leaders had originally agreed upon.
That left the two parties in a deadlock. Voting on some 100 economic revitalization bills was cancelled as the NPAD refused to turn up at Wednesday's plenary, blasting the ruling party for not sticking to the original pension deal.
It is the most humiliating and the most insulting day. The ruling party trashed the deal that we agreed upon.
In order to end the standoff on Thursday, the NPAD requested an extra parliamentary session to start next Monday. National Assembly Speaker Chung Yi-hwa gave his approval. During the new session, the rival parties hope to fix a date to pass the stalled pension reform bill for civil servants. The NPAD's newly elected floor leader Lee Chong-gul will carry out negotiations with the ruling party starting next week. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And Korea's presidential office is adding to the pension reform debate once again, expressing its disappointment about the reform plan. Choi Yu-sun reports.
The presidential office has expressed regret over the Assembly's failure on Wednesday to pass a bill to reform the country's deficit-ridden public employee pension system. In a statement on Thursday, President Park's senior press secretary started by pointing out shortcomings in the reform plan suggested by Korea's rival political parties, echoing the president's earlier remarks that the size and time frame for pension payment cuts were disappointing.
The extent of the bipartisan reform plan fell far short of the initial objective, but we recognize the start of bipartisan efforts to reform.
Kim then said the party's deal to link the national pension plan to the civil service pension reform bill involves state finances and should be addressed separately. The proposal to raise the national pension coverage to 50% of a subscriber's average income level was Wednesday's bone of contention.
If the political parties truly care about the public and are in politics for the people, they should first reform the public employee pension. Then they should gather public opinion on the national pension system and ensure financial integrity before introducing a plan to boost retirement payouts.
The press secretary also called on the political parties to fulfill their promises to the public and approve a slate of pending bills that aim to enhance the economic well-being of all Koreans. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's biggest tech company is getting even bigger. Samsung Electronics has unveiled plans for a gigantic factory. The plan, expected to begin rolling in the first half of 2017, got a head start thanks to the government's deregulation drive. Shin Se-min takes us to the site.
This construction site will be home to Samsung Electronics' new DRAM memory chip line at a cost of $14.5 billion. It's being built in Pyeongtaek, 70 kilometers south of Seoul, and will officially begin churning out chips in the first half of 2017. The tech giant also aims to grow its presence in the semiconductor sector, hoping to drive up its sagging smartphone earnings. The Pyeongtaek project is massive, Samsung's largest ever investment in a single production line. It's expected to generate 150,000 jobs and produce $37 billion in revenue. In a written statement, the company said that the Pyeongtaek line will give the company a leg up in the Internet of Things industry. Samsung's decision to invest in the plant came a year earlier than planned, fueled by government support in the areas of electric power and industrial water supply. President Park attended the opening ceremony along with 600 other government and related officials.
이번 평택 공장 건설을 통해 기흥과 화성으로 이어지는 세계 최대의 반도체 생산 인프라를 갖추게 되었는데 명실상부한 세계 반도체 생산의 중심으로 한 단계 더 도약해 나가기를 기대합니다.
She added that the government will continue to raise the competitiveness of the industry by eliminating regulations in order to boost high-value product industries like the system semiconductors. Since entering the market 40 years ago, Samsung Electronics has led the global memory chip market for the last 22 years. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
One Korean survivor of Japan's wartime sexual slavery continues her fight for an apology from the Japanese government. Lee Yong-soo flew to the States hoping for a formal apology in Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's speech to the U.S. Congress. And following that expected yet disappointing speech, she visited California's memorial for the so-called comfort women on Wednesday in an effort to draw attention to the horrors and the victims faced. Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
Visiting this monument was important, but difficult for Lee Yong-soo. The statue in Glendale, California, was built to raise awareness of what happened to her and approximately 200,000 other women during World War II. He is 86 now, but looking at the bronze figure took her back to the day she was dragged from her family and forced into sexual servitude for the Imperial Japanese Army.
I was around this age at the time, but now I'm a lot different. I have changed so much.
Lee traveled to the U.S. to be present for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's recent visit. She wanted to add her voice to the chorus of critics, calling for Abe to acknowledge and apologize for Japan's past atrocities in his Congress address. He was there for the speech, which did not include a new apology. She says Abe's behavior in Washington shows his deceptiveness and his Conservative Party's efforts to distort history. Most of Lee's fellow survivors of sexual slavery have died, but she's determined to keep fighting.
We will see if Abe's term in office will outlast me. I will live up to 200 to get an apology from him.
Lee's efforts have been backed up by criticism from the international community, including 187 historians who have since condemned Abe's view of history and called for a sincere apology. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And fresh tension is brewing as Japan seeks to list industrial facilities where tens of thousands of Koreans were forced to labor during Japan's colonial rule of Korea as World Heritage sites. Our Hwang Sung-hee sat down with CSIS Japan Chair Michael Green, who is in Seoul for the 중앙일보 CSIS Forum, for his view on Japan's UNESCO bid and the ongoing historical dispute.
No historical site is pure. I mean, there's always some negative aspect to human history. And I think it would be better for the Japanese side to explain the important significance of these sites in terms of development and, frankly, a development model that much of the rest of Asia copied, while at the same time acknowledging that there was human suffering involved as well.
In a recent interview, you assessed Abe's recent comments positively. Can you elaborate on that?
By acknowledging that Japan, that these women were trafficked, from a U.S. perspective, this is a strong or stronger addressing of the fact that the Japanese people and the Japanese government have some accountability. From an American's perspective, in the country where this word trafficking was developed as a matter of international law, what the Prime Minister said is a step forward. It's not a huge step forward, but it's considered a step forward.
So you don't think that Prime Minister Abe has to necessarily say that the Japanese government was responsible for this human trafficking when he uses the word trafficking?
No, I don't think that the Japanese government's official stance on the comfort women issue is adequate. However, I think there's a view in the U.S., and I certainly have the view, that it has moved in a better direction. Although I should quickly add that on this question of comfort women, Japan has no support in terms of the history. 190 historians in the U.S. signed a letter describing what they thought happened. And I think that's the mainstream view among scholars and experts.
Considering that Abe also needs to satisfy his conservative domestic supporters, do you think it's possible, how likely is it for Korea and Japan to resolve this historical dispute while Abe is in power?
An apology seems very political, and I think a hard target to achieve under the current Japan-Korea relationship. But I think there is room in the next statements in the upcoming anniversaries to get more. And that will require not freezing high-level dialogue until there's a resolution. And since President Park and Prime Minister Abe are not talking directly, there has to be someone very close to each of them who's brave, politically strong, who works on this issue bilaterally.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Dr. Green.
Thank you.
And the frosty ties between Korea and Japan over history and territory have had a negative diplomatic impact across the board, and that includes coordination on trade issues. Our Kwon So-ah says a glint of hope may be on the horizon as the trade ministers of both countries are set to hold a rare round of talks later this month.
They are expected to be the first ministerial-level trade talks between Korea and Japan in 2 years. Korea's trade ministry says the offer to hold discussions came from Japan and that Trade Minister Yoon Sang-jik and his Japanese counterpart Yoichi Miyazawa have tentatively agreed to sit down on May 24th at the 2015 Boracay APEC meeting in the Philippines. A ministry official said strained relations over historical and territorial issues have severely limited opportunities for the two trade ministers to hold talks. With the time and place seemingly set, the two sides may finally be able to touch on the issue of a possible free trade agreement between Korea and Japan, as well as another three-way deal including China. Talks on the TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership, a regional trade pact being pushed hard by the White House, may also be included. Korea's trade ministry says the agenda has yet to be fixed, but the two sides are in the final stages of making adjustments. The last bilateral meeting between the trade ministers of Korea and Japan took place on the sidelines of the 2013 Indonesia APEC meeting. However, Japan's territorial claims over Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island and Tokyo's lack of repentance over its wartime sexual slavery have halted further negotiations. Korea and Japan's economic relations haven't been looking good recently either. Bilateral trade dropped by almost 14% in the first quarter of this year compared to the same period last year. Analysts mainly attribute this to the weak Japanese yen, which is eating into the price competitiveness of Korean products. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Let's shift our sights to inter-Korean relations. Civic groups from the two Koreas will work together to organize an event commemorating the 15th anniversary of a historic summit between the two Koreas next month. A Seoul government official said Thursday that the agreement was reached after a 3-day meeting between the delegations from the two Koreas. It's the first time in 5 years the event will be held. The summit produced the landmark June 15th Joint Declaration, which lays out plans for economic cooperation between the two Koreas. The civic groups also discussed hosting another event in August, marking the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan on August 15th. Although the two sides weren't able to finalize the locations of the events, it is expected that if Seoul hosts the June event, the August event will take place in Pyongyang. The outcome will be announced on Friday. Over 60 years have passed since the Korean War armistice, but thousands of U.S. soldiers are still missing. The process of searching and digging for the remains continues, but the progress has been minimal. Our Connie Kim files this report from the most recent excavation site on the south coast of the peninsula.
Death Valley. Masan earned that name when many U.S. soldiers died here shortly after the Korean War began. They successfully repelled North Korean forces attempting to push towards the port city of Busan, but the remains of a number of the fallen never made it back to the States. With recent civilian reports that up to 6 American soldiers may have been buried in this nearby mountain, experts from South Korea and the U.S. have teamed up for a 3-day investigation. It took hours of searching and shoveling to expose just one human skeleton. At this point, the team can't determine whether it's Korean or American.
The body was buried 1.5 meters deep. Because the soil is moist, the remains weren't preserved well. We plan to be extra careful when transporting it to our central identification laboratory.
If the lab can verify that this skeleton came from America, it'll be repatriated to the U.S. Some 36,000 U.S. soldiers are known to have died during the Korean War. Close to 8,000 are still unaccounted for. Since 2001, only 7 American bodies have been ID'd with help from the South Korean military.
At the rate that we're going, it doesn't seem like we're making progress very quickly. This is a great challenge. It requires a lot of perseverance. It requires investigative skill. It requires scientific capability.
It'll also require time, lots of time. For now, experts from South Korea and the U.S. will continue the search, attempting to ensure that the war dead can rest in peace on home soil. Connie Kim, Arirang News, Masan.
Media producers and providers from all over the world, including Arirang TV, the station you're watching, are in Baeksko, Busan.
They're all gathered for Asia's largest broadcasting content mixer. Our Kim Ji-yeon sends this report from the southern port city.
The 9th Annual International Busan Contents Market opened on Thursday, attracting media makers and buyers from across the globe. Industry experts consider the event to be a golden networking opportunity and a venue for discovering and sharing content, ranging from TV dramas and documentaries to animation. 1,500 buyers and sellers are to participate in the 3-day event. That's also welcoming some 500 firms from 47 countries. And of course, Korea's one and only English broadcasting station for international viewers, Arirang TV, participated in the event, releasing its new program guide for the year.
What are the latest trends in broadcasting content for this year? And can you introduce some of the shows that Arirang is introducing this year?
I see more studio shows than outdoor shows. And this year, Arirang TV is pitching 2 new studio shows, which are Bring It On and Shooters. And Bring It On is an interactive survival show, and it's real time. And so people can vote for the presenters and they choose the winners. So it's a new trend and it's our new format. And Shooters is a debate show.
The Korean Culture Ministry's Cultural Contents Fund session, held on Friday, is one of the most anticipated programs of the expo, which runs through Saturday. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News, Busan.
And for more top international headlines, we connect to our Paul Yi at the News Center.
Our focus today, millions in Britain cast their votes in the country's general election. The U.S. sends its top envoy to make peace in Yemen, and the international superstar Jackie Chan speaks out about his son's drug problem.
Well, Paul, let's start off in the UK. This has been described as the closest race in British politics in a generation. Give us a rundown of what's at stake.
Well, there's a total of 650 parliamentary seats up for grabs, and based on which party wins a majority will determine who will lead the new government for the next 5 years. Incumbent Prime Minister David Cameron, who's the leader of the Conservatives, was one of the 50 million registered voters who are casting their ballots on this Thursday. His party has been campaigning on policies that it claims will benefit the working class.
Ordinary person. They've always had a problem in people think that they are a party that more caters for the well-off element of society. That's never been true. Their vote has always been quite strong amongst all sectors of society over the years, but they know that they need to win over people who have perhaps suffered economically from the recession that the whole of the Western world has had over the past 5 or 6 years. They need to offer them something.
In the weeks running up to the election, healthcare funding, economic growth, immigration, and European Union membership have emerged as the top issues among voters. And turning to the crisis in Yemen, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is seeking a diplomatic solution to the conflict as government forces and Houthi rebels continue to fight in the streets. On Thursday, Kerry held talks with the Yemeni President Abd Rabbo Mansour Hadi in the Saudi Arabian capital. Earlier, Kerry called on all sides to keep civilians out of the line of fire.
We are deeply concerned about the humanitarian situation that is unfolding in Yemen. Shortages of food, shortages of fuel, shortages of medicine. The situation is getting more dire by the day, and we're deeply concerned about that. And we have urged all sides, anybody involved, to comply with humanitarian law.
The visit came as Saudi Arabia announced a 5-day ceasefire in the region to help deliver much-needed humanitarian aid. In the meantime, Yemen's mission to the United Nations has called on the Security Council to offer ground support in its war against the Houthi insurgency. And finally, international action star Jackie Chan is making no excuses for his son's high-profile drug conviction, saying he's ashamed and angry. The older Chan was speaking Thursday at an event in Singapore where he was named the city-state's first celebrity anti-drug ambassador. Seizing the opportunity, he warned of the consequences of substance abuse.
Don't ever think you won't get addicted, because not only are you hurting yourself, young people, remember, not only are you hurting yourself, which is fine, but you need to know your drug addiction will hurt your family. In order to get money, you'll steal, you'll rob. In the end, you're hurting your country, you're hurting your family. It's a domino effect.
J.C. Chan was released from prison in China this past February after serving a 6-month sentence after he tested positive for marijuana at his home in Beijing. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
While the southern provinces had summery conditions today, the upper regions had weather that was more like spring, though the skies were a bit cloudy. In fact, there is a slim chance that the metro area could see some sudden showers tonight. And tomorrow is Parents' Day here in Korea, and the weather is shaping up to be as pleasant as it was today under mostly to partly sunny skies. But people in the southern provinces should continue to have summery conditions, with the high expected to soar to 28 over in Daegu. And here in Seoul and Busan will hit 23 and 22, while Gwangju will top out at 26 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other regions, Daejeon will see a high of 24, and Jeju Island and Dokdo will top out at 20. The weather has been generous lately with continuous warm and sunny spells, but it's also adding a dryness to the air. So until the rain comes sometime early next week, the air will get drier each day. So be sure to drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, they say you're never fully dressed without a smile, and it looks like that necklace will put a smile on anyone's face. That brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Che. Please join us again same time tomorrow. Good night or good day, depending on where you're tuning in from.